Okay, and here's hoping stuff doesn't like crap out and crash on me anymore. So this is going to be just a rather short video of the tool that I finished making, partially on behest of other people asking, partially just as a result of basically iterating on this a bunch of times. Effectively, to start with, there was a bunch of changes in the March 2022 Drone Apocalypse update that changed the volume on some melee items, and then they also changed the power score and durability for a bunch of other parts. So I had done a very high level breakdown of parts in the past as far as for a specific faction, for a specific part type, what was the sort of values you could expect. That's its own post, which I'll be linking in the description for this, that I had some people asking an update, but I didn't for a while. Then when the new update dropped, I did a comparison in another spreadsheet of all of the new values compared to old ones and how that ended up affecting these faction values. This is basically a continuation of that based off of an interest in making this information available and sortable to the public rather than looking at having an entire sortable list of stuff like with this, which is obviously cumbersome and hard to use. It's looking at making a sort of dynamic query sortable thing for users to use. So that leads me to this. So this is going to be a workbook that I'm going to be posting for distribution on Reddit. The goal being not only are people going to be able to have this with all of the information via the comments and notes as to what it was all in one location as opposed to the 3-4 different posts and 2 videos, but also being able to look at using sort of a dynamic query tool for it. So that is going to be on the second page. Just for this first one, I'm not going to read through everything because the purpose of me having written it is for people to read it and understand, but this is just going to be the incredibly high level if you're looking at the different factions and roughly what each would be useful for, which again is covered in some of the prior videos. Then if you make a copy of this document by saving a copy, then you can access the tool, which is going to give a list of all of the structural parts in game and allows you to sort them. So there's going to be parameters here. Again, if you don't have the spreadsheet copied, you aren't going to be able to edit this. You're just going to be able to view it. If that's enough for people's purposes, then by all means. But otherwise, they have the ability to go through and get the data they want. So I didn't include all of the calculations publicly off to the side or anything to try and hopefully keep all of the information on this page specifically useful and helpful. So for instance, it's not going to show you the calculations on how it starts from high to low, but it does do that based off of a rather obtuse formula. If you have any interest with spreadsheeting or with making your own derivative works off of this, by all means feel free. For instance, I know that Dravoid, what I don't actually know how to pronounce their name, but in any case, they were talking about wanting to do a constraint solver to optimize durability. That's something I'm also interested in doing, but not really the purpose of this sheet. However, if you want to go about doing it, it would be relatively easy to do that at a high level, just even based off of these values, maybe even extrapolating the additional ones that don't show up on that list and then working from there to include it. So again, if you want to poke around with stuff on your own, by all means, make a copy of it, see what you can do with it. But if you mess it up or if you, end up losing interest in it or it doesn't work, you can always just make another copy and work off of that. So this is all working off of a hidden data sheet, which is basically just me manually typing out all the values based off of the in-game items. In the case of them updating the parts in the future, I would be updating this and then basically reposting or posting a patch log or something for this sort of distribution. But unless you're looking at making your own sort of, again, derivative work off of it, or if you're looking at maybe using the count as a checklist for what you do or do not have, or you want to sort of limit the parts or, again, use a constraint solver or whatnot, then this is all information that you can use for that. But for most people that want a little bit deeper of a dive from just the high level structural part ratios per faction, then you can use these to sort. So there's 4 parameters you can choose from. You can choose the raw, effective, or melee durability. Again, the definitions on what those are available by hovering over the cells with the red upper right corner with the pertinent info. So as you select it, it will change what it's actually sorting for. You can do it on a per part basis, which is just saying what part has the highest melee durability or raw durability or whatever. You can search for the melee durability divided by power score, mass, or volume as well. And then you can also search from low to high if you want. So for instance, if you wanted to have something that had really high durability per volume, then you'd search from high to low. If you want something that has a lot of low durability per volume, which is to say it has a lot of volume per durability, you can just search low to high, which is effectively the inverse sort. Then you can also choose to include or exclude bumpers and passive melee parts. So because they don't apply to the vehicle durability, for instance, you will find that they aren't terribly useful for increasing the health bar of your craft. Therefore, you can choose to exclude those. So for instance, if we are looking at raw durability per power score of parts and we wanted the highest ones, the most effective ones first, you'll see that a lot of them are actually bumpers or passive melee weapons. Now, that's not going to be terribly useful if you're doing something like trying to make a bastion build, which is maximizing health and its damage resistance of that health buff. So we can just remove those from the list. So hopefully this tool is useful for people. The gist being that if you set up the parameters and you don't really touch anything else and don't really have any other work that you want to see done to it, you'd be able to just look at the parts and say, okay, these are the ones that I'm going to slap on my build. So for instance, if you're looking at doing the example of your highest durability per power score for a bastion build, you might decide that the parts that have very small volume that are 2 to 4 pieces long are not preferable to you, so you might start working on it via the digger sides and onwards. So yeah, I will be looking at probably updating this so long as I'm playing Crossout and continue getting the patch notes. It is not a difficult job to export all of this data. The most difficult one being volume, basically, because I just had to manually size each object by surrounding it and seeing what is or isn't blocked by the hitbox on the item. Then I had to redo that for the pertinent parts during the past update, where they changed the shape of some of the more angular pieces, which was causing wedging issues. So if they make those announcements on stuff, it's easy enough for me to just go and redo the volume or to, rip the new stats and put them in. But if they're sort of doing these behind the scenes or not explicitly saying what the values are, it's obviously a lot of work to go through and recheck 225 some items. So otherwise, it's just going to be based off of whenever I see something, or if people correct me or whatnot, then I'll be able to add a patch log and go from there. Hopefully there isn't a whole lot that I've missed, but in any case, this will be correct as of this update until any such time where any of these structural parts change.